So I am super glad to be at my third Monktoberfest, and I'm going to talk about empathy today. The talk, well, I'm not going to start with the talk, I'm going to start with this, a little bit about me. I love that Monktoberfest is in Portland, Maine, because I'm originally from New Hampshire, and I live in California. So this is my chance to come back and get my East Coast fix every year in October. It's my, I'm not going to tell you what it is, it's my wedding anniversary today with my husband. And he knows I need to get my Monktoberfest fix, so he's very understanding and empathetic, and he's willing to celebrate with me on Sunday when I get home. So that's all good. And I wanted to also point out that I started my career at Sun Microsystems, and that is relevant because that is where, when I was working on Open Solaris, after I spent years in engineering in the kernel group and we decided to open source the operating system, that's when I met the team at RedMonk and learned that there were some serious Red Sox fans out there in the world. And today I'm head of marketing for Citusdata. I won't be talking about what we do or anything, but we are a sponsor, and I'm super glad for those of you who are already wearing the socks. That's very cool. Thank you. And that's me on Twitter. And I have way fewer Twitter followers than all of the rest of the presenters, so feel free to help fix that problem. The most important thing to know right now, though, is that I've been here for 3 nights so far, and I have not switched time zones. I have been up till 3 o'clock in the morning every single night. And so thank God for coffee. And also thank God that Rachel and Steve see fit to start this at the not so early hour today of 10:30 in the morning. Thank you. Yes. I don't understand those tech conferences where they expect you there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I think that's crazy. All right. So the idea for this talk came when I was at a business dinner a few months ago, and I was sitting on the edge, on the end of the table. It could fit 2 people, but I was right here, and there was a brilliant engineer from the Netherlands right next to me, another super smart person there, and then a third person on the left. And not the Netherlands dude, but the person next to him was leaning in and kind of had their back to the person to the left of them. And we were having a really interesting conversation. And that other person, I'm trying hard not to name names, I don't know if you can visualize this, they couldn't participate because somebody had their back to them, their shoulder to them, and they were blocking them in the party. And so first I was like, thank God my mom taught me to lean back, right, and let people access a conversation at a dinner party from both sides. But I was also trying to figure out, how do I help that guy? Because I know how important it is, not just on a personal level, right, how he feels, but also on a business level, that he be part of this conversation. So I kept directing questions at him and saying, so, I understand that you're interested in blah, blah, blah. I'm trying not to reveal any of this. It's all confidential. And you know, I would pull him in, and everybody would turn to look at him as he answered. But then inevitably, 30 seconds later, the shoulder was back, and the back was there, and he was blocked out again. And so it just made me start thinking about empathy. And I've been trying to come up with a Monktoberfest talk proposal. And then from there, I started thinking about all those times I'd get, like on Friday afternoon, this really long email. And this is, again, protecting confidentiality. This is not an email. But I found that this Paris Review has these sleep aids that you can go read to put yourself to sleep at night. They are apparently a collection of the most soporific prose on the planet. And so, but I've received emails that look like this. And I mean paragraphs and paragraphs and War and Peace and these it's a treatise. And sometimes they're from people that are very important to me. And I know that maybe in the middle of paragraph 5, there's something I'm supposed to do. Something that matters. Something that might affect my individual performance review. Going back to Darmain. And so then I'm like, I'll just put it aside. I'll deal with it later. And I'm going to posit that the person who wrote this email was being selfish. And they had no empathy for those of us who had to read it. So then that reminded me of way back. I think this tweet was from me in 2009 when I had even fewer followers. And I was working in product management, and I I was trying to express the fact that when you're sending something out that 100 people are going to read, if you haven't double-checked it or triple-checked it, and if it's unclear and fuzzy and full of ambiguities, it's going to just cause confusion and churn in your organization. And so I think it's important to have empathy for those people who are going to read what you're sending out. And you should be clear, and you should make the effort to be clear. And so then, another piece of the puzzle, I was on a WebEx the other day with a customer, and I was interviewing him about why he chose Citus and how he discovered us and what he uses us for. And I loved this compliment. It made me so happy. I think I literally got out of my chair and I danced a little jig, which I will not do right now. But he said, when I first visited your website, unlike some other companies, I could actually really quickly figure out what it is you guys offer, what it is Citus does. And that made me super happy because we do strive really hard to make that information really accessible so that we use plain English and just try to spell it out. So then, finally, if this is the conference that started from a tweet, I suppose this talk maybe started with this tweet back in 2015. I love this cartoon from Gaping Void about empathy. Show me a great marketer, and I will show you a person with great empathy. So that's all the drum roll and the lead up for this talk. And I think in the abstract, I promised that I would connect this subject of empathy to jobs to be done. So here's that connection. And before I dive into the self-help section of the talk, where I walk you through some tips and things that I think will be useful for everybody, we do think really hard. Part of how I employ empathy in my work as a marketer is to be really sensitive to what jobs are people trying to do. When they come to my website, when they come to my documentation, when they come to my team, they might be trying to do different kinds of things. And how do I make sure I give them what they need so they can get their job done? Because at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want to get their job done. So yes, self-help. We're going to go through 5 things that I think everybody here might find useful to grow empathy muscles. And I do not want to insult any of you. Some of you may be masters at this already. I think I'm pretty good at it, but boy, oh boy, I can use reminders. So let's dive in. And before we dive too far, let's do a little definition thing. So Merriam-Webster, I really wanted the Oxford English Dictionary definition for this, but I'm not a subscriber yet, which I probably need to fix. But it was 3 in the morning, and so this was easier and more accessible for me. So I threw this on here. But the thing that's interesting is empathy. You don't just know rationally that someone's going through something, but you are vicariously experiencing those feelings too. Even if those feelings have not been explicitly communicated and described to you, but yet you're feeling them also. So yet another Gaping Void cartoon. I want to point this out too, because a lot of people confuse empathy with sympathy. So empathy, I feel your pain. Sympathy, I'm sorry you're in pain. And I really want to drive home this difference, so I'm going to put up a picture of a beautiful chocolate Labrador puppy. So, and I got one of these 2 years ago. My children are both in college now, and I have a junior and a freshman. And so I guess right before before his last year of high school, my husband decided that, okay, I don't want to be the only one left alone home with Claire. I better get a puppy. I'm going to get someone else for her to focus on to help her through this transition. So we got this chocolate Labrador puppy. And so those of you, now that you know that story, how many of you can feel both how adorable and cuddly and warm and fuzzy this beautiful creature was, but also can feel the awesome responsibility of, oh crap, I thought I could travel anywhere, anytime, and now I've got to take care of a puppy. Okay, so some of you, but not all of you. All right. So let me go to the next one, cats. So I'm allergic to cats. I hate cats. They make me want to scratch my eyes out, so that's why I don't like them. But many people love them. And one of my colleagues recently, his cat was really sick. He was taking it to the vet. He was really upset. This is like some long-living cat. They live longer than dogs. Is that true? Okay. This cat had been around like practically his whole life. And so he was upset, and I had sympathy for him, right? Like, I'm so sorry, but I don't know how you live with that thing. But I did have sympathy. I had no empathy. So how many of you would have empathy for this man that I work with? Okay, so some of you would, but not everybody. All right. So then I started to think about, well, wouldn't it be painful and super crazy exhausting to have empathy for everyone all the time and everything? Like, what if right now, while I'm standing on stage, I had empathy for, I'm going to randomly point out people, you, because you have a headache, and you, someone here is missing their flight because of the sheet folding thing. By the way, I brought a scarf over here, and I thought maybe I could try to mimic what Joe, no, okay. So what if I had empathy for someone here, maybe Rachel, who maybe didn't get enough sleep last night, if Alex was keeping you awake and crying or something? What if I had empathy for all the problems that some of you have with you today? I wouldn't be able to give this talk. So I don't actually think we can have empathy all the time. And in fact, that's why we do build walls sometimes around ourselves. You talk about growing thick skin. James, sometimes we talk about compartmentalizing, to keep certain feelings in another little box over there, or keeping certain people who might bring you down at arm's length. So we have all these tools to protect ourselves. So we can't have empathy for everyone all the time, I don't think. And no, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. There might be one in the room somewhere, and she knows better than me. But so why are we going to talk about it? Is this the agenda for my presentation? Well, I had to come up with something, Steve, so that's why. But also, I actually don't think you can be a really good leader without employing empathy. So I don't think you can be a really good conference organizer without employing empathy. And so kudos to Rachel for, I know you've got this in spades, because there are so many things, so much attention to detail, so many things you guys have done right. And I think it's because you really, really, truly can kind of feel our joy and feel our delight and plan for it. I don't think you can be a really good parent without empathy. And in fact, boy, oh boy, our little children, or big children in my case, they know when we're faking it. They know when, we're not really there and really present. And of course, I started the talk with this. I don't think you can be a good marketer without empathy. And so when I'm hiring, when I'm recruiting, and I am going to take in some of those honeycomb recruiting tips that Emily shared yesterday and look into interviewing in production. But when I'm hiring, I do look for evidence that this person has empathy for the end users, for the website visitors, for the people who are coming to us. So now let's dive in. 5 things that I think will be useful. So in my case, obviously I work in marketing, so I'm going to talk a lot about the examples I will use have to do with content, websites, newsletters, blog posts, stuff like that. This is you guys. I took this from Steve's Instagram post. Thank you very much. I was trying to find some way to communicate you, and this is all of you. And I recognize that you don't all work in marketing, and maybe you don't all care about newsletters or website design or copy or layout, but I do think you all communicate. So I'm hopeful that in the emails you write, the papers you write, the blog posts many of you write, the tweets, maybe not so much tweets, you will find some of this useful. And I'll start off with this picture of my son and I. We went, turns out beekeeping is a thing. Is anybody here a beekeeper? Yes, very cool. Michael and, what's your name? Yoka. Well, I think I want to be a beekeeper in my next career, in my next life. In fact, my next door neighbor, this beautiful, amazing 80-year-old woman, she's a beekeeper now. I mean, it's just super cool. And it's very good for my fruit trees, so I like that aspect of it. But this is my son and I. He looks nothing like this now. He's grown. He's changed in the last 2 years. And we went and had a tour in Carmel of a bunch of beehives. And, okay, another weird story. We're on the tour, and I'm kind of can't really see the guy who's leading the tour, and all of a sudden I hear his voice, and I realized I knew him, and I went to college with him. So it was like a whole small world thing. So we had this tour, and one of the things I learned is that there are these guard bees that sit outside the beehives, and sometimes they don't let strangers in. they don't let newcomers in. No, 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 you don't belong in this hive. They might let some migrants in nearby if they're close enough to them, maybe like neighbors, but no, not other bees. So, but my tip, my suggestion is don't be like those guard bees. Do open up your circle. Do start to be aware of the fact that maybe you're blocking somebody out. I mean, this group is freaking awesome and amazing, and that's why I'm here the third year in a row. I love this community that has built up around the Red Monk team. And I think it's special, and I think it's unique. But even here, 2 years ago, there was a group of like really tall people who were standing in a circle. And I'm short, and there are other short people in the world, and one of these other short people couldn't get into the conversation. And she tried. She was like, you know, and just nothing opened up. There was no room, and finally this person walked away and found another group of people to talk to. It's just really easy to be unaware. So my human tip there is try to open up that circle, and especially be sensitive to it at dinner tables and at business dinners. All right, my second tip, I just had to bring Stephen King into the mix. Why not, right? Although, just for the title, the word it. I edit a lot of blogs that other people write, just to make sure it's clear and conversational and down to earth and really accessible and written at that like 4th grade level, so that the information, while it's complicated, can be expressed in a simple way. And one of the best practices that I employ is just kill the frickin' pronouns. Every time you use the word it to make things shorter or more elegant or whatever, it can pause the reader in their tracks and make them think about, what are you referring to there? Is it that noun? Is it this noun? Is it that noun? And it's not all that explicit, but they are stopped, they are paused, and that can be a moment where you lose them. So just spell it out. Say what you're going to say. Don't refer to it with these kind of indirect references and pronouns. So that's a simple tip that you could do. And if you get sensitive to this, you'll notice all the its that people use, all the thises and all the that's, and you'll realize that, wow, oh yeah, that is ambiguous. But most of us just fly on by, and we sometimes will misinterpret. So then at 3 in the morning, I decided I didn't want to call out anybody's, did this just get louder? Or am I just getting more powerful as I stand up here on stage? Okay. I took a blog post that one of my colleagues had written, and I just took out all the nouns and replaced them with its, and I was just going to point out that that the prose becomes more ambiguous and a little bit less clear when it is peppered through these. But then I realized it's not a really good example, because it's just not a really good example. So we're going to move on by, and you're just going to take my word for it. Getting rid of the pronouns really does help your prose. So now I'm going to go to number 3. Use headlines. Now, it was hard to find a non-political headline when I was creating these slides the last couple days, but then I found one about baseball. I don't know what blue is. What's blue? All right. Okay. Sorry about that. Should have been the Red Sox. At least it's the Washington Post. Anyway, it's about baseball. But the point is, headlines are super, super powerful. I can't tell you how many PowerPoint presentations I see where that title field at the top, you know, that horizontal bar that so many of our PowerPoint templates use, people use it as subject titles, like benchmark results, conclusion, summary. But it's your opportunity to tell people what you, the presenter, the speaker, the expert, really think. That if, you know that phrase some of you have used on stage, if there's one thing you're going to remember, that's your chance. Use a headline. Tell them that one thing you're going to remember. And I'm not giving you this advice in a Machiavellian, let's mislead people and, prime them to conclude the wrong thing kind of way. I'm talking about being honest, but also being clear about what that main takeaway is. So here's an example of a case study that existed before I joined my company. And first of all, the headline isn't even at the top. The headline's like all the way over here. It's a little bit wordy. And then second of all, the section headline, because those matters too. Those matter also, right? It's not just the main headline. It's right here, and it's the challenge, which doesn't tell you anything. And people don't read. I mean, I'm not even motivated to read these paragraphs. The challenge. Well, what case study doesn't start with the challenge? And so I had these pages redesigned, and it's a much longer story. It's like 2,500 words or something like that. But each section, each big chunky paragraph or couple of paragraphs has its own section headline. And so this is the challenge, finding the optimal database to enable blah, 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 blah. And then the main headline is up there and it pops. And there are some big metrics for people who do not read prose, but do care a lot about numbers. So there are just things you can do with headlines. At the end of the day, it's your chance to tell people what that main takeaway is. And if you don't, they're going to guess, and they might not conclude what you were hoping they would conclude. I remember years ago when I was early in my career, I went to get this woman's advice about my resume. I swear, I was like 28, 29 years old, and I had a 4-page resume. I thought I had 4 pages worth of amazing, impressive accomplishments that needed to be communicated to my prospective future employer. And she just pushed it across the table to me and she said, Claire, you need to cut this down to 1 page. Either you pick what you want people to know about you, or they're going to randomly pick a subset, but no one's going to read all 4 pages. So headlines are like that too. All right, tip number 4. I lost my slides. There we go. Make it scannable. So a number of years ago, when I was head of product at my last company, the sales team wanted me in Europe a lot to help close deals and present the roadmap and talk to customers and things like that. And so I empathize with you, James, and Steve, and Rachel, and all of you in the room who travel a lot. I mean, I was United 1K, and it's great. You get these nice upgrades sometimes. But you're away from home a lot, and you're traveling a lot, and you spend a lot of time in places that look like this. And one of the things I developed an empathy for then was the salespeople I was traveling with and how they were trying to be as productive as they could be. Yeah, I know there's this image of people in the airport bar just drinking away, but these folks were looking at their cell phones as they walked along. How long is this going to go? All right. As they walked along, looking at their phones, trying to be productive, trying to get things done. And it made me realize that so many people, who are doing sales enablement, now I'm going to trip, so many people will compose these emails or put content together on a big, gigantic screen and not think about the little tiny device that it's going to be consumed on and how important it is to make it consumable on those small devices. So I grabbed this slide from Luke Robluski, but I just thought it was a really good picture of these different device sizes. And one of the things I'll do when I'm composing an email that's going out to a bunch of people where I really want it to get through is I'll literally just shrink the margins. What does this look like when it's super, super narrow? And figure out if that's going to work or not. And when I was talking to Darmaine, when I first met her a couple of days ago, she immediately jumped to the fact that people don't read, they scan. That's what they do. So we kind of have to meet people where they are. If that's what people do to consume information, then let's understand that, and let's give them something that's going to make them productive and be helpful. I love this O'Reilly data newsletter. It's just an example that I thought I would point out. It's just as good on the phone as it is on my desktop. The pink kind of little headlines, and there's usually way more of them, like maybe 10 or 11 or something like that. They pop. They've got a really good line height. There's white space around them. They're not too wordy. Some of them are short. Some of them have a line wrap. They're not all the same. And it's very easy for me to scroll down and figure out, okay, which of these do I want to read the prose for? I don't read the prose on all of them, right? I just scan those higher level H1s and decide what I want to dive into, what's relevant to me. So I just think it's a great example of scannability. All right. So then the last thing, read out loud is a tip that I recommend to everybody. If what you are creating needs to be conversational, needs to be down to earth, needs to be written at that 4th grade level, your brain, if you read something to yourself, your brain fixes all the mistakes. I don't know why. I haven't read all the research, but that is how it works. You correct those mistakes, you fill in the blanks, and it might actually, well, don't trust that. Read it out loud and judge your writing by, is this something I would say over a beer? And if it's something you would say to explain something one-on-one to someone over a beer, then you've nailed it. Another way to know if you've nailed it is there's this really interesting app called the Hemingway App. And has anyone here ever used it? All right. I think it's awesome. It will help people who are used to writing academic papers or papers at that like 17th grade level to kind of bring their language down to a point where they're still writing about something really complicated, but they're making it sound much more simple and more consumable. Now, it turns out I think my writing's pretty good, but I score really badly on the Hemingway app, and I think they have a bug. And I think the bug is that they don't handle em dashes very well, or they think em dashes, they ding me. I use em dashes all over the place. And I think I get penalized for that rather unfairly, but I haven't tested that out yet. But that's neither here nor there. I quoted you on what you said about programming in English. I love it. So I said I was only going to give you 5 tips, but I'm going to give you 6. And this relates to death. And I almost put a picture of a coffin here. When I first joined Citus, and I was working actually with the Red Monk team and with Steve on figuring out, what do my users really care about? And we realized that at the end of the day, they don't really care about the database. They want to not care about the database. They don't want to worry about it. And why is that? Well, because they have better things to do with their time. So part of the value I offer them is they're not going to get those 3 a.m. pages anymore in the middle of the night. And that's good, because then they get to sleep or get woken up by their kids, but at least their kids are cute. Databases are not cute. So I think part of how I employ empathy, and part of how I think we all should, is just recognize that time is our absolute scarcest resource. We are all, at the end of the day, going to end up in a coffin or in an urn or dust to dust, and we'll die. And so if time is our scarcest resource, anything that we can do to make our customers, our users, our clients' lives more efficient, happier, more delightful, better, less problematic, that's all good. So yeah, I almost put a coffin here, but the clock was pretty. And a coffin that felt very morbid. I didn't want to do that. So that's it. I think empathy really matters. I hope you do too. I hope the tips are useful. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, because yeah, I haven't even hit 900 yet. And I do work really hard on this newsletter, so if you are interested in databases and Postgres and stuff like that, feel free to join on in. Thank you. Yeah.